So this is, to begin with, the beginning of your financial house. Who here has heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? Anyone? You? Okay, good. Anybody kind of in a nutshell could give us an idea what that was about? Or has it been a long time since middle school? So Maslow's hierarchy of needs was this idea that we have to meet our basic needs before we can move on to the next one. There were these levels, you know, and at the most basic was kind of this primal survival level. And we couldn't deal with anything else until we had addressed the most basic needs, survival first and foremost. This hierarchy of needs, this is basically Isaac's hierarchy of financial needs, okay? And I give Maslow the credit for the original design, but beginning with survival, meeting basic needs applies to our finances as well. So in those areas you have things like food, shelter, clothing, transportation, income, and budgeting. Now, Maslow would have had probably food, clothing, shelter. That was, you know, even a caveman needs that. But now that we have economics, we need transportation, we need income. We get most of our things from income versus subsistence farming or hunting and gathering. And budgeting, which is the basic areas of finance, okay? Then next, once we've learned to survive, we have safety. We have a need to preserve and to protect what we have, okay? So here you have emergency fund, health insurance, life insurance, disability insurance, property and liability insurance, all those things that you kind of build up and use around you to create a safety net. And then we have growth. This is preparing for the future. So now that we've survived, we've protected what we have, we can start expanding and looking forward. And so in preparation for the future, we use things like retirement funding, education funding, and other goals that we may have. Maybe I definitely have 3 daughters that I have wedding funding for one day, right? And the good news for you is that because I have 3 daughters, I'll be working throughout most of your retirement. So that's good news for all of you. God willing, if I survive that long, right? And then last, we have a legacy. What will happen with my stuff when I'm done with it? What do I want to have? What's my succession plan? And so there we have things like estate planning, charitable giving, and recreational goals. So let's look at the building blocks of financial success. There are 10 steps. Happens to be the same as AA, no particular reason. I just happened to land on the same number as I was going through them. And these are organized as bricks that you build your financial house with, and they're numbered 1 through 10, and that is the order in which you should address those things, okay? A quote from the Mutual Business Plan is, although we use the same basic materials that competitors do, we're more adept at putting the pieces together. We take solid products and services, apply superior knowledge and skill to craft better solutions for our clients. In the financial business, we're all using the same tools, right? Kind of like a carpenter, they're all using the same tools. It's what you do with those tools that matter, and that's where we place our emphasis. So this talks about how ordinary people, like, you know, the ancient Egyptians, since we're kind of looking at a pyramid-like structure here, got extraordinary results like the pyramids through their vision, dedication, hard work, and their craftsmanship. This also applies to building your financial house. And you see that we have some stages of construction listed out here, where if you're building a house, first you have to have a foundation, right? Then you frame it, where you create walls and ceiling. Then you have finishing, where you're going to put sheetrock, plywood, shingles, all those type of things on it, painting, and then eventually furnishing. Would it be a little ridiculous if I poured my foundation, framed up my walls, and then moved in my furniture? People would probably laugh and say, that guy's an idiot, he doesn't know how to build a house. And it wouldn't be good for my furniture either. It's probably going to get soaked because it's not properly protected, right? So, but when it comes to our financial lives, it's not uncommon that that's kind of exactly what people do sometimes. They start funding an IRA before they funded an emergency fund. You know, things like that, because they're looking to make money investing and they haven't even protected themselves from short-term risks. We have to keep things in their proper order. Otherwise, you're just going to be cashing out the IRA and paying taxes and penalties and all these things, and even extra taxes, because you didn't have the right emergency fund. Okay, so that's why it's important to do these things in order. You know, it is appropriate in one sense that it's a 10-step program like Alcoholics Anonymous, because people are seriously addicted to bad money habits. And they are hard to break. Okay? And it's not entirely your fault. The entire machine of commercialism is designed to do one thing, and it's really good at it, which is make you dissatisfied with what you have and convinced that what you need is what they have to sell you in order to fill that void within you. Okay, so by and large, it's just marketing doing its work. Okay, and they're good at it these days. So we have, you know, numbers to kind of instruct you on what order. Have you ever purchased a new item or appliance, taken that instruction book and thrown that away and said, I got this, I don't need that? And only later to kind of find yourself rummaging through the trash and trying to figure out where you got these extra parts from and why things aren't quite fitting together like they should. Maybe it's just me, I don't know, but that has definitely happened to me. Kind of similarly, you know, your financial house is supported by each of the bricks below it. You know, in this structure, if we pull out one of these, it's going to begin to collapse. It's not going to be a sound structure any longer. So tonight we're going to look at what makes up each brick and begin getting kind of a blueprint to begin construction of what we call your financial dream house. There's more than probably what we'll cover in one evening, can cover in one evening in terms of how deep you can go into any one of these topics. Okay, but I'm happy to talk with you at more length later. You can reach out to me, and perhaps if enough of you are interested, we'll have some, you know, expansion classes on some of those topics. So let's go talking about getting your financial house in order. You've already started building your financial house. I want all of you to take out this photo. Does it look kind of like this? Have you been following a blueprint, or have you been haphazardly running around, gathering materials wherever you happen to find them, and assembling them together into a functional shelter, but a little bit in disarray? If you were building a home to shelter your personal property, you would hire architects, engineers, builders, contractors, all just for a place to keep my stuff and to lay my head, right? When you look at your financial picture, you have your future income, spending, saving, and investments are worth a lot more than the stuff you have in your house, and yet oftentimes we take a lot less care in how we structure that building. Does that make sense to spend less time and less effort on planning something upon which all your other possessions are built? It's kind of backwards, isn't it? The main reason, because it's more fun. That's why we do a lot of things that we do, right? Sitting around doing my financial stuff is just not fun. Picking out new paint for my house might be quite a bit funner, right? So, you know, the average financial house that I see is like that. It's like that shack where they've got a lot of stuff that they've just kind of assembled over time. It's not bad, it works, but it obviously was not done by a builder of, you know, great skill. So we call that the shack. The other one that I think we prefer, we'll call the chic. Okay? Now the chic is also built of some repurposed materials. It's shipping containers and items like that that have been repurposed as well, but by a much more skilled builder, right? Who had a plan, who had a blueprint, who knew what they were doing when they went about it, okay? Tremendous difference that it makes. So which would you rather live in? It's pretty apparent, right, for most of us. So FSI, what we are like a financial home builder. You know, we have inspectors, architects, engineers, laborers, contractors, all those staff that you would use throughout our organization in order to help put all those pieces together. We want to put, have the end in mind at the beginning so that you don't waste time, money, energy, all those things. So, kind of a to-do list, if you are looking at getting your financial house in order, is hire professionals. Get a financial home inspection. Look at what's wrong today. What issues do I have? What are problems, things I need to address in the future? Review the results of the inspection. Have anybody here had a home inspection before? They're pretty telling, right? I've used them, spent $500–600 so that I didn't spend $100,000 or $150,000 on a mistake, right? So it was costly, but it was worth it. In the end, it was cheaper than making the mistake. Identify the strengths and weaknesses, see what's going well, what's not, draw a blueprint, come up with, what am I trying to do? Where am I trying to get in the future? Begin building the improvements, and then over time, performing the routine maintenance, right? So checking up, checking in, making sure everything still fits right, and that sort of thing. So that's the process of getting it in order. So let's talk a bit about block one. And I know for some of you, some of this stuff will be a little rudimentary, but I don't want to take anything for granted, okay? Survival, block one, income. Without income, you can't survive. Make sense? Now, income equals everything else you need in order to live, right? I mean, air. We don't have to pay for air currently. You do need that. But everything else you can pretty much obtain with money, which you obtain through income, right? There are two types of income: earned income and unearned income. Now, most of us, unfortunately, have to focus on type number one, earned income, right? We have to work to make money, okay? Unearned income is where money works for you, okay? So earned income are wages, profits from self-employment, those sort of things. You normally get paid them on a W-2 or 1099 form, report them on your income tax at the end of the year. Unearned income is things like interest, dividends, pensions, Social Security benefits, and other passive forms of income like business partnerships and things of that nature, okay? And those are important to understand the difference in those two. We typically go in our earning years from all earned income, and then in retirement, we're normally moving into all unearned income. Not that you didn't earn it over time, you've certainly worked for it, but that's kind of the transition. Now, block two, we're still in the survival tier, is food and shelter. Or, as I added here, food, water, and shelter. I guess I should add air. But these are the ones you have to pay for. And, in Maslow's, this would be number one. I put income ahead of it for one reason. Most of us here do not have master survival skills, right? Now, Rambo, he doesn't need income. All he needs is a survival knife and his bow and arrow, right? Yeah. But for the rest of us, we need that income in order to get these things. Okay, so if you aren't retired already, you will need to earn your income, and that's going to require a job. Boo-hoo, right? Lesson one in personal finance. You need an income, get a job. Everybody learned that one already? Yeah. Okay, I hope so. If not, you're young, sink it in. Where's the 1-month-old back there? Get ready. Okay. So these are the most basic elements of survival. Without them, we die, right? Any questions on why that's important? All right, good. So, your income has to be adequate to provide those for you. Normally, that rumbling in your tummy is all the motivation you need to go get some of that income, right? Those have always been the most powerful motivators for human existence, but and providing for yourself and the ones who depend on you is a very powerful instinct in us. The desire to eat, to drink, to have somewhere safe to sleep is probably the greatest motivation for productive labor. You know, today, of course, one, confusing thing we have socially is programs, including parenting practices, that disconnect the relationship between labor and income and needs, right? We get people privileged with life necessities without having to work for them, right? That's a very unhealthy thing to teach our children. It can happen at home when we're raising them. It's a very unhealthy thing to reinforce in our adults, okay? But I'm not working in the Congress or the Senate, so we'll have to leave that up to them to resolve. But in our households, we can teach our children these things by helping them make the connection with work and income, paying for things that are needed, living within their means, things like that. So review that early and often with your family. Survival block 3, personal care. If you're going to interact in society and remain healthy, you have to take care of yourself, right? You got to do stuff like shower and shave and buy an alarm clock and brush your teeth and take care of your health, and wear appropriate clothes for your workplace if you'd like to keep that job that you got, all those type of things, right? And many of these also take resources and cost money. Those expenses go into the category we call personal care. They're not as pressing as those basic needs, the food, water, shelter, air, that type of thing, but they're next in line. So we got to take care of those, okay? If you don't take care of yourself here, you lose the ability to take care of those first 3 blocks that we've been working on up to this point. So, now I want you to not get confused between personal care and pampering, all right? There is a difference. One's responsible, one's not necessarily. And the difference between caring for yourself and spoiling yourself, right? Personal care is necessary. Pampering is luxury. Make sense? For example, we do need a haircut. We don't need a $150 monthly salon visit. I know some of you ladies may disagree that is necessary, not a luxury. And I understand, I respect that, that's fine. But we have to keep this in mind. When we're looking at shoes, we need shoes, right? We don't need a $300 pair of LeBron James Nikes, right? Your teenager might disagree with me on that. Okay? Unless their occupation is professional basketball player, in which case that's just tools of the job, and they are appropriate. So there are times that that's correct. But a high maintenance lifestyle is not going to bring you peace, prosperity, and plenty, which are kind of the grail of what finances should do for you if you use them right. Okay, survival block 4, budgeting, the last one of survival. Budgeting is determining how to allot, and it's a bad word, really, in finance. Just segue into that. This is the #1 thing, probably, that people hate to do in personal finance, okay? It is the exercise. It is the broccoli of the financial world, okay? Really good for you. Most people despise it. Many people despise it. And the reason why is because you have to determine how to allot the limited resources you have to meet your present and future needs. I heard this when I was in the grocery store. It stuck with me. I really liked it. I happened to be working on this presentation at the time, so I said, I got to add that in. And was in the grocery store. There's a little girl. She's talking to her mom. She asks Mom, "Can I have something here off the shelf?" I don't know what she wanted exactly. And she said, and her mom says, "No, honey, we can't." Little girl says, "Why not?" Mom says, "Because it's not in the budget." And the little girl says, "Mom, we're on budget again? How long are we going to be on budget?" Like she was grounded. And Mom says, "We're going to be on a budget all the way until we're rich, honey." And I loved that answer because she's teaching her daughter a really valuable lesson. Her daughter doesn't like it. You see how we naturally kind of resent that sort of thing. Okay? But if you failure to budget, you get debt. So talking about the 4 P's of budgeting is 1, to provide, 2, to prepare, 3, to plan, and 4, to perpetuate. We want to provide for our survival. We want to prepare for safety. We want to plan for the future. And we want to perpetuate a legacy, kind of like those 4 tiers that we talked about. It does take discipline. It takes commitment. But it doesn't have to be complicated. It should be fail-safe with some redundancies built in to protect your money from its worst enemy. Who is your money's worst enemy? You can say it. You know who it is.
Me.
You are your money's worst enemy.
No.
Yes. It would be fine if you would just leave it alone. Quit trying to get rid of it as fast as you can. As I say, you got to watch that stuff. It'll start, if you don't get rid of it, it'll just start piling up. It'll start reproducing. Next thing you know, it'll be out of hand. You won't even be able to get rid of it fast enough. Okay? So, if you don't take account of your expenses and manage them, you end up in debt, which leads to bankruptcy when it becomes unmanageable. Not all debt is equal. It's not all equally detrimental. There are sort of healthy forms of debt, unhealthy forms of debt, in my experience. The unhealthy forms of debt that I want to see eliminated from everybody's finances are what's called unsecured debt. There are 2 types of debt, secured and unsecured. Anybody know the difference? Yes, sir.
Credit cards are unsecured, your home mortgage is a secured debt.
Correct, right. So, secured debt has collateral. You borrow against property, okay? Typically a home, an auto, life insurance loan, 401k loan, all those are secured. There's collateral property that you can sell to pay it off. Banks, any good bank's not going to lend you more than it's worth, so you're not going to end up upside down on something like that. Got to be careful these days with car loans. They're running notes out to 84, 96 months. That's never going to work for you. You got to be 48 months and under, and don't even think about really going beyond that. You're going to be upside down if you do. Unsecured debt, there's still a collateral, but the lien is attached to your butt, right? And the problem with that is you can't just sell it and walk away, right? It just follows you around everywhere you go. Now you go to work and sell it for whatever amount per hour, you know, so that you can pay your bills. But it's attached, the security is your future earnings. You know, so when people say that debt makes you a slave, that's the type of debt that makes you a slave, because you can't just sell your stuff and walk away, right? So that's the one that concerns me. Also, from your balance sheet standpoint, it's just a straight negative. There's no positive asset to offset it and bring you back to 0 or into the black. It sends you into the red, okay? So those type of, normally they're high rates as well, because there's high risk to the lender, and so, because all they have, again, for security is your promise to pay and the knowledge that you have earnings that legally they can attach to, and so those are very unhealthy forms of debt. We want to eliminate those as soon as we can. So there you go, there's my soapbox on that. When I run into cases, I see high amounts of unsecured debt. I know that this house has been having a lot of struggles financially, right? It doesn't happen if things are going well, I'm keeping up every month, stuff like that. Somehow there's a hole in the bucket there. There's too much month, not enough money, spending habits, whatever it is, some things need to change for sure to turn that around. The only way to resolve unsecured debt is continually to reduce your lifestyle, right? Take more and more of my money and give it to the credit card company or the student loan company, and less for me and my family to live on month to month, okay? And that goes on until we can't do it any longer and we end up bankrupt. Okay. So, let's see, let's go on and talk about block 5. We're in the safety tier now, the second tier. This is rainy day savings. Have you ever heard the quote, people don't plan to fail, they fail to plan? Yeah. Things are not always going to go well in your life. Did you know that? I hope you know that. I mean, if not, you know, God bless you. You've had a wonderful life so far, apparently. The funny thing about the unexpected is you can expect it. You don't know what it's going to be, but it's going to be something, right? It's always something, right? We've heard that. And so, and those unexpected things happen with on a kind of a really regular basis in fairly predictable amounts. I don't know what it's going to be this year, but it's going to cost somewhere between $1,200 and $3,500 to fix it. You know, maybe a little bit more. And I know I need to have something set aside. And I know if I'm not putting that kind of money aside on a regular basis, I'm not going to have it the next time that it comes up. Makes sense? So expect the unexpected. That's what the rainy day savings is for, the emergency fund, whatever you like to call it. So if you're living paycheck to paycheck, one day your paycheck is just not going to be enough to pay what you need to pay that month. Anybody ever experienced that before? Good. So things break down. Your income can be interrupted due to an illness or something happening at work. Unplanned expenses arise. You have to have something to fall back on. Now, kind of a segue here is that for a lot of people, when they don't have this, it's a credit card. A credit card is not an emergency fund. Do you guys understand that? If you need to use the credit card for emergencies, you need to cut it up and get rid of the credit card. Because it's enabling you to have unhealthy financial practices. The only person who can use a credit card is the one who does not need it. That's the only one who can use it soundly. They could pay cash, but they're not because they get a 1.5 rewards or frequent flyer miles or whatever it is. You know, it's got to be paid in full every month. You got to be a loss leader for the credit card company with no fee on the card, and all they're doing is giving you points and helping secure your transactions when you're buying souvenirs at the gift shop in Mexico. That's the only thing they're good for. Otherwise, they're financial suicide. They're financial weapons of mass destruction. Get rid of them if you can, if you can't manage them. Learn to live without them, and then you can learn to live with them. So savings helps you smooth out the potholes of life. Again, if you don't have savings, you will have debt. And when we look at savings, I hear some people say, well, you know, the return on a savings account is not good. You want me to keep how much money in there? You know, I might say $10,000 or $15,000, 3 months of my wages. I'm going to have that much money sitting around with no interest? You need to think a little different about savings. There is a great return on a savings account. Think about if I don't have a savings. Again, what am I doing? I'm putting it on the credit card, right? You know what rates on credit cards are like? Good rates, 12 or 15%. Ever been late one time? 25, 28%. Okay? So you could say a credit card would average 20% rate. Okay? Very reasonable. 15 pretty prime terms in these low rate environments. And when I pay the bill for the credit card, I got to actually work, which means I got to pay taxes, which means I don't take all those dollars home with me, right? So there's another 20 to 30% tax cost on that. So when I look at the value of having $1 in savings instead of having to work and earn another dollar to pay a balance on a credit card, it's actually about a 55% return on a savings account. 20, 25 I'm saving on a credit card, 25 to 30 that I'm saving on taxes on wages to try to earn my way out of this, right? There's actually nothing else like that that's safe, that you can just put away money and have basically a 50% return on it just by having it available when you need it. Okay? So a dollar, so you've all heard the saying, the old saying is a penny saved, a penny earned. Adjusted for inflation, maybe it's a dollar saved is a dollar earned. It's not a dollar earned. A dollar saved is $1.50, $1.60 earned. And that's a powerful thing to learn. It's kind of like getting a match in your 401k. So, this is safe. It's guaranteed. We don't have to take any reckless, investment risks or speculate on penny stocks or anything like that in order to get this. We just got to sock some money away in our savings account so that it's there when it's needed. Okay, so let's talk about Block 6. Does that make sense to you all, the return on savings? Mm-hmm. Okay.
You could also put a return on your peace of mind, too.
Well, that's priceless, right? It's like a MasterCard commercial there, yeah, it's funny. I think about, when I was 18 versus today, my attitude's about money. I'm like, man, if I was 18 and I had like $400 in my checking account or in my liquid net worth, I was going shopping. I mean, there was something, an iPod or something. There was something I didn't have that I could get with that. No reason to have that money sitting around in an account when it could be doing something good with it, like getting a new iPod at that time. Today, if I had $400 liquid net worth, I would be so anxious I could not sleep at night. I wouldn't let anybody in my house spend any money on anything. So it's amazing how your attitudes change. And once you get used to having some savings, the peace of mind that you mentioned of having some cushion, you never want to go back to the old way of running down to the wire. So it's interesting how our attitudes change that way. So let's look at Block 6, our required protection. There are some protective measures that you're required to put into place by law or by contract. Required insurance is paid for by you for the benefit of someone else. Pretty sweet, right? Not for you, but pretty good deal for them. Now, if you're very wealthy, you may be able to provide what's called a certificate of self-insurance. You can go to a court, you can prove I've got X amount of money, and they will say, okay, sir, we can call you self-insured. You've got to kind of hold that in an escrow type account. You can do it with auto insurance and other areas like that. Not with health insurance currently, but that's probably because they have no idea how high a bill could possibly be.
Can I say something?
Yes.
I was really shocked when I found out that the mortgage insurance we paid for with our mortgage didn't do squat for us.
No, it does not. That's required insurance. It's not for your benefit, it's for the bank's benefit. Yeah. See, the thing about required insurance is that it's always for somebody else. In the case of mortgage insurance, is making sure that if the bank gets that collateral back and it's not worth what they lent on it, that you've paid a premium for something that helps make the bank whole again, right? Like if you own a home, free and clear, it's paid for. Does the bank or anybody make you carry home insurance on it? No, they don't. And we'll talk about that a little bit on the next slide. But some required protection, there's three that primarily come to mind. Auto insurance, you're required to carry it if you own a vehicle, right? Home or renter's insurance, if you have a mortgage note or a tenant's lease, then you're required by your landlord or your mortgagor to carry that type of insurance. Now, renter's insurance, is not to protect your TV. Your landlord wouldn't require you to carry something to protect your TV. They don't care about your TV. Okay? They would want that liability limit so that if you punch holes in the wall or burn their property down, there's somebody to subrogate the payments from. They know that they're probably not getting them from your bank account. Okay? And then one of the new required insurance, health insurance, which is required if you have a pulse. Okay? Or you meet one of the qualifying exceptions. So, now, these things may be prudent. They may still be a good idea for you, even in the absence of somebody making you do them. Like, for instance, take health insurance. Did any of you carry a health insurance policy before there was a law that said you had to? Yeah? A lot of you did? Why would you do that? What?
Just in case.
10 days in the hospital was
$750,000 for 10 days in the hospital.
I'm just telling you, you
Yeah.
can't afford to not.
You can't afford not to do it, right? You live in America, the most expensive medical care in the world, right? So you can't afford not to do it. So it can be good for you. Today it is required, so not just common sense would dictate, but it's required. And part of why, so why is health insurance, carrying health insurance for everybody else's benefit? Because it's required, then it must be for everybody else's benefit. Why is that? Who benefits if everybody has health insurance?
Well, if everybody has health insurance, then the insurance is what's covering the loss of income. When you get the hospital bills, you're not going to be able to pay for it. Somebody's paying for it.
Right. Somebody pays the bill always, right?
Period.
So if you don't pay your medical bills and the insurance company doesn't pay them, who pays them? The rest of us pay them, right? So it's social insurance. That's why we have it. Yes, sir.
But if you have medical insurance, who pays the bill anyway? All the other people that are paying. You didn't pay $750,000, did you?
I'm not
It's
sure
premium.
they paid it out.
Yeah, the insurance
But
company paid it.
where
and
do they
divide
get their
it up.
money?
Yeah, I got you. No, I
From the rest of us.
The whole idea is it's spread across the group instead of,
Yeah.
10 people don't get sick, one person gets sick, all those premiums pay for the one person.
It's
basically the way it works.
It's the miracle of how insurance was born. A long time ago, people's houses used to burn down and stuff. Did you have money? If not, everybody had to get together, raise you a new house, all that type of thing. And finally, they all got together and said, wouldn't it be nice if we'd all just kind of pool our resources together and then we'd have money to pay for. We don't know whose house is going to burn down this year, but somebody's will. We'll just put our money together, and then when it happens, we'll pay for it. And insurance was born, right? Same thing with life insurance, stuff like that. So it just came from that kind of a group, community, rainy day fund, in a sense. Okay. So let's talk about Block 7. This is not your required protection. This is your needed protection, okay? So needed protection is used for the direct benefit of you or someone you care about. This is good for you, so no one will make you do it. Make sense? Let's think about some other things that no one makes you do that are good for you. Eat healthy, exercise, do a budget, save your money. Does anybody make you do any of that stuff? Nope. Nope. You know why? Because they don't care. They don't care what you do to you. They just care about what you do to them. Right? It's that simple. So this protects your assets, protects your family, protects your income. Those are the type of things that go in here. They're the type of things that nobody makes you do, but you do it because it's just smart. It's a good idea. These include things like disability insurance, life insurance, long-term care insurance, healthcare savings, like healthcare savings accounts to pay some of those expenses that aren't covered under your health policy, and supplemental insurances like Medicare supplements or critical illness, things like that. This is kind of like building walls around a city that's grown from, a single settler in a hut to a village, to a town, and now to a city with lots of people and resources that need protected from threats around them to preserve the progress that they've made, right? Before really the rule of law across a federation of states, then the way you kept your city safe was how? You built a big wall around it and kept all the bad stuff out, right? And that's kind of the tier that this blockade serves for you. And that whole safety tier really is that wall around your city. Or the real tall privacy fence around your house, since we're talking about a financial house. Okay, let's talk about Block 8, future need funding. The funny thing about the future is that today was the future, and now we're in it, right? The moral of the story is that the future is becoming the present every day, right? And each day you're losing time to prepare for the future. Now, when it comes to preparing for the future, the irony of it is that time is your greatest ally, the most powerful force, and you are your worst enemy, right? So that's the struggle that we're balancing. I don't know if you've heard this quote from Albert Einstein or attributed to Albert Einstein. He says, compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world. He who understands it earns it. He who doesn't pays it. Have you ever heard that? Yeah. Why do you say that? Because he's a mathematician. And he's seen what compounding does, not in the early years, but you get out 10, 20, 30 years, where the interest on the interest is worth more than the principal that you ever put into it. He says, that's amazing. And when it's working against you, it's just as amazing, but a lot more painful. Like, how did that $1,000 I spent turn into $6,000 of payments on my credit card? I can't believe it. So, a little math test for you. What is $0 compounding at 100% annual return for 30 years? Zero. Good. We've got some math wizards in here. Excellent. Zero. So, the most important factor in growing your wealth over time, growing your assets over time, is to turn that from a zero to anything but a zero, right? Because this formula is a lot more impressive when we put $1 in there, or $100, or 1,000. Okay? So, no matter how fantastic of a return you're getting on your investment, doesn't mean anything if you're not funding it, if you're not putting away enough money. You want to know a fail-safe, guaranteed, works every time way to get rich? Who wants to know the secret? Oh, come on. There's millions of dollars made every year on the secret of getting rich. You just know what's going to happen, right? We're going to tell you, save lots of money. Right? Works every time. But it's kind of like exercise. They say, no, give me the magic pill instead. I just want to drop 20 pounds like this. I want to eat the same I've been eating. I don't want to exercise. I want to lose 20 pounds this week. And so we have all these industries, all these errant, teachings and things that promise an easy way to do this stuff. And it's just not that way. So the best way to meet your goals for the future is get started now. The first dollar you save, the oldest dollar in your retirement plan, is the most valuable one in the whole plan. Did you know that? The first dollar you save with compound interest may be worth 4 or 5 times more than the last dollar that you put in right before you retire. Did you know that? If you wait until you're about to retire, try to put the money away, the only way to make that up is to put away $4 or $5 for every dollar you didn't put away a long time ago. Okay? Did you know that life does not get cheaper as you get older?
No.
Yes, it doesn't. And what I've found is that your responsibilities increase and inflation decreases your buying power. Like, I marvel all the time, like going back to when I was 18 and I had $400 in my checking I had to get rid of. Is I thought, man, if I would make over X amount per year, I would just be set. I would be rich. I don't even know what I would do with it. And now, I make a lot more than I did when I was 18. But for some reason, it feels like I don't have more spending money. I think it says $3. I don't know if that has something to do with it. And the wife and all that sort of thing, right? So house, all those responsibilities, I tell my son sometimes just what it costs to keep the house open every month, and he's just flooring. Oh my goodness. Yes, son. Something to look forward to. So that's our abstinence training program. Oh, yeah. I'm tempted to go off on tangent there, but I will stick to the script. So some people understand this concept very well. I find math teachers are really good at this. They do math, they say, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm going to put away as much money as I can and save it and let compounding do its thing. And they tend to do pretty well. Most of us procrastinate this for several reasons. One, we have excessive current obligations. We do poor budgeting. We have too much to pay for, not enough income. We have to go back to block 4 and work on our budgeting and our priorities. 2, our current wants. Like, I know I should save for retirement, but that's like 30 years off, and this 2017 Corvette is right here, right now. right?
Anybody wanna buy a Corvette?
And if that's 4 or 5 times, there you go. Little plug for Mary Ann. If you do need a Corvette, maybe she'll give you a deal. Let's see, yes, so current ones. And when we look at that 4 or 5 times, if that's the wrong decision for you, that's not a $60,000 mistake. That's a $300,000 mistake. Because that money not only went out there, it wasn't into another program working for you over the same period of time. So these things have big ramifications. Something I like to call, what's it?
It was cute.
Yeah, right, exactly. Exactly, it's fun. That's why we want to do. That's a lot more fun. We know that. Peter Pan syndrome. It won't happen to me. I'm going to be young, healthy, invincible forever. I don't have to worry about it. I got all the time in the world, right? That's another reason that we procrastinate. We have future ones, other things, maybe not things I'm buying right now, but I'm trying to put it into a bigger house, a new RV, or whatever it may be, okay? So we're not addressing our need. And first and foremost, really, because you are paying everyone else first instead of yourself. I like to say, you do all the work. Shouldn't you get to keep at least a little bit of the money? Does that seem fair? It really doesn't even seem fair that you only get to keep a little bit, does it? One of the great secrets of wealthy people is they always pay yourself first. That's the mantra if you ask them. If you wait to save what's left over at the end of the month, guess what? There is nothing left over. Money has this funny way of always finding somewhere to go. Okay? There's always something that you don't have. And so, what you find that you do is you pay yourself first, you set up something automatic, protect your money from yourself, put it away right away as soon as you get it. That's why people have money in 401ks, but they don't have them in savings accounts. They don't even get to touch the money before it goes into an account, right? And they're not sure how to get it out. That's the other place I find that most people have money in places if they can't quite figure out how to get it. It's not always all that complicated, but sometimes just the fact that it's a little confusing is just enough to keep them out of it, right? So they have them in their life policies. They have equity in their home. They have money in their 401k. Not really that they couldn't get it. It is possible. They just weren't sure how, and it was a little inconvenient. So that's one way you can protect your money from yourself. And what you find is if you start taking those increments out, setting them aside, you don't even know what you were spending that on in a lot of cases anyways. You don't even miss it. You do one less thing that you used to do that wasted some money, and you really don't even notice, what did I do different? So, let's look at block 9. In the growth tier. What we call current goal funding. Now I put current goal funding after future needs. Goals and needs are different. Goal funding is deferred. It's deferred spending. Typically large purchases, home improvements, vacations, and education. Now, education's a little hard to classify, when I look at it. Education's more and more perplexing these days in the financial planning world. The cost of education, the amounts I see young people borrowing. I've seen over $350,000 in student loans, unsecured debts. That's a big burden. That's quite a nice house. Paid for, quite a nice house, right? So how much more are they earning? You've got to balance these interests. You've got to really examine it. But if I'm going to be a computer engineer, I probably have to go to college, probably a need to do that. But it doesn't mean I have to complete it in 3.5 years or 4 years, too. I can maybe spread my credits out or some things like that. But the point is that goals, so for you, education, it may be placed in the needs, it may be placed in the goals. I'm not here to dictate that to you, just talk through it with you. But goals are desired, not required. Make sense? We can live without. If we don't ever get them, we will survive. Okay? I feel like I'm dying. If your teenager doesn't get those LeBron James, You might want to kill them, you know, while they're irritating you, but they're not required. These are nice and not necessary. They shouldn't take precedence over any of those prior bricks that we talked about, but they often do. They're kind of what short circuits a lot of those things. And when it comes to saving here, and I didn't touch on it on the future needs, but when it comes to retirement, we recommend saving at least 10% of your income for retirement. When it comes to other savings, current goals, emergencies, all those things, you should be targeting another 10% of your income, okay? Some people act like 10%, you just save 10% of your income and you're good. You are not. When I look at the numbers that it takes to pay these things, if you're not putting away about 20% of your income, you might have enough, be putting away enough to retire, but you're not putting away enough to get to retirement, and all the things that come up in between, okay? And there's a lot of different ways to address that. So, for instance, when we look at current goals, if you can't save for retirement and buy that new Harley, guess what? You can't buy the new Harley. Now, I'm not saying you can't have everything you want, Dan. I'm just saying you can't have it all right now. Right? Deferred gratification, deferred spending is how you do this. Okay? You can delay the purchases, save up for it until you can do it responsibly and plan it, and you'll be okay. Just as long as you're not short-circuiting the other things that happen, diverting those funds into something that's not necessary. Never liquidate your IRA to buy a new car. Okay? Don't cash out your rainy day fund for a 3D, 4K TV. Right? And don't stop your 401k contributions so that you can pay a bigger mortgage payment. All of those things are like financial suicide. Okay? You're really compounding the mistakes. So we have to, and that's why we've got to kind of have that budget and our plan of where are things going to go so I know what my mortgage payment can be. Okay. Any questions on goals? All right, block 10, estate planning. When we talk about your legacy, some people say, I don't need an estate plan. I don't have a legacy. You know what? You will leave a legacy. The question in my mind is your legacy going to be one of prosperity or one of despair? They both come, they're inherited, they're taught, they're raised up and ingrained in our children. How we think about money, how we handle it, all those sort of things, what we know about it, okay? Are we going to raise people in a poverty mentality, a short-term gratification mentality? We're going to raise them with responsibility, good role models, and things like that. That's part of the legacy I'm talking about, is what are we teaching our children? What examples are we setting? But also the literal physical legacies that we leave, you know, the assets that I didn't use that I leave behind. How are they disposed of? So, you know, it's our assets or debts sometimes, and it's the attitudes, habits, and behaviors that we've taught others about money that's our legacy. I've got bad news for all of you. You're going to die. Not today, hopefully. You have to consider what's going to happen afterward. Okay? It's just irresponsible to not give any thought to something we know is inevitable. Right? So, some things that everyone should have. A last will and testament. Okay? The last will and testament is the will that most people are familiar with. Okay? It explains your desires, bequests for your estate, things like that. So that's what's commonly referred to as a will. Then the living will, which is another will that is less commonly referred to. Some will call it the medical directive. This outlines your wishes for medical care in the event that you're unable to express yourself. It includes things like do not resuscitate orders, or what measures of life support I'm willing to accept and for how long, and things of that nature. You know, some folks say, I want any machines connected to me. Some folks say, leave them on as long as you can until I run out of money. Give me every chance. I don't know what comes next, but I'm not in a hurry to find out. You know, that's kind of depends on our attitudes about it. That's things you spell out in your living will. And I really encourage that, because if any of you have been in the position of having to decide for a loved one, a parent, a family member, whatever it may be, what to do, and they don't have these instructions, it places the onus, the burden on you.
You know, nobody ever asked for a living will,
Yeah,
and my husband had one.
you just got to tell them to just provide it to them. But at least for you, like if they're asking you what you want to do, at least you have his written instructions to say, okay, well, this is what he would have wanted.
I didn't abide by them. I kept them for as long as I could.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, you do. It does have to be presented to be effective. But I understand. I can't blame you. I don't blame you. So yeah, Mary Ann's had some close personal experience with this.
Yeah, I've shepherded both my mother and father through the process.
Right?
Every time they were admitted, this is in the last 5 years,
Yeah.
that was one of the questions they asked.
Do you have a living will?
Right.
Or do you want to complete, you know, if they're able, they'll
Or,
ask if
yeah,
they can
if you
complete
don't,
one while they're there.
Here's the form.
Yeah, you know, if they don't have one. So, but, you know, if you have, you know, a stroke or a heart attack, something that, you know, puts right away, you can't express yourself. That's where that living will comes into play. And you really don't want your kids to have to decide, do I unplug mom or not? You know, and kind of feel responsible for that versus saying, I'm just doing what they asked for. It gives them some peace. You know.
Nobody ever asked. We never volunteered. Me and the kids decided we're not telling them. We want them to live.
Yeah. That's all right. Probably not the first time you guys didn't agree, right?
Right.
That's okay, you know. Medical and financial power of attorney. These are different. Powers of attorney means somebody has the ability to act on your behalf, to exercise your legal authority, to sign, engage in agreements and contracts, things like that, just with the same power as you do. These can be limited to financial powers of attorney, medical powers of attorney. They can be called limited financial, limited medical powers, which mean that they only kick in certain cases where, like, for instance, again, I'm unable to, 2 or more doctors agree that I am no longer mentally fit to handle my own finances. They can't be related to me. That way my kids don't try to, you know, cooperate against me and lock me away somewhere and seize control of my finances, that sort of thing could be drawn into it. And it allows them in limited cases or in general cases to exercise your powers. So you may want to give somebody absolute power of attorney. Casey, maybe you want to give Christy here's power of attorney. I want you handle everything. Take care of that stuff. I'm going to go to work. You take care of the rest for me. You know, and you can do that, right? There are some obvious reasons why that makes some folks uncomfortable. There's often very few people, even sometimes our kids, that we would give unlimited reign to exercise all of our authority and control over our assets. So the limited is a good idea. Medical powers is definitely a good idea. And the durable general power is the one that's kind of the unlimited. And then the fourth, and one of the most powerful tools, is the beneficiary designation. One of my clients is a judge. He says, I don't use a will, I don't use a trust, I don't use any of that stuff. I just put good beneficiary designations on all my property. And it works. A beneficiary designation is free. It essentially establishes a separate, irrevocable trust for each account once you pass away. Okay? Nobody can change them once you're gone. Nobody can take control of it but the beneficiary. And it will even trump a living trust or other forms of trust, because if you have a trust, and let's say my 401k plan, in my family we have a trust to a family trust. So we've got this family trust, and on my 401k plan I've got my wife listed as beneficiary. And my trust is maybe contingent. If the trust is not the beneficiary, it has no dominion over that asset when you pass away. Okay? automatically, it's the beneficiary. Doesn't matter what anything else said. The will, nothing else. Okay? I've seen cases like that. You know, bad cases where husband and wife were divorced. He used to have her on his 401k plan. He died. He wanted his money to go to the kids, but the ex-wife's name was still on it. Who got the money? Mm-hmm. And please, name the person you want to get the money. You know, in that case, I had to sit and help her fill out the forms. I sat with the kids. She told me how, you bet, I'll give this money to the kids as soon as it comes in. They had remarried, she'd remarried, got a new house. Kids never got any of their money. He might have left her on there thinking, well, she'll take care of the kids. It may have been intentional, I don't know. Do not do it. Don't leave it to the good son and tell that he'll take care of the others. If it's a quarter to each, put a quarter to each. Okay? And all they need when you have a beneficiary on property, when there's a death, you don't even have to have the joint owners and all that stuff. A lot of times older folks will add all the kids to their account so they can all sign them. You don't even have to have that. If you've got the beneficiary on death, they walk in, we need two things. We need, well, maybe three. We need a death certificate, proof that you passed. We need legal form of identification, government issued ID, driver's license, right? Military ID. And we need your signature on the documents. And it's done. No probate, no complication, it's that easy. Okay? You can put this type of designation on everything. Do you know you can put this on your house? You can put this on your car. Most people don't put it on their car. When you go to register your car, nobody ever asks you, who would you like to get this if something happens to you? You tell them though, and they will put it on there for you. It'll be on the title. It'll say, transfer on death to so-and-so. Okay? Those are the things that end up where we've tried to avoid probate, and maybe we even got a trust, and we did all this stuff, and we didn't put the trust name on everything, or we didn't put the beneficiary on everything. You know, if you get the whole, go ahead.
I was going to say, my parents did that, my dad did.
Yeah.
And did everything POD, TOD.
Yep.
And there were 5 of us, so what happened is the house, everything was out, no will.
Yep.
The problem with that is when the house needs repairs before you sell it, I had to get a lawyer to get all 5 people to give up some of the money.
Yep.
Well, I had to get money from some of the payable accounts to take the money to go in and repair the house, since it was TOD, to do repairs just to get it to sell. Because everything was TOD, there's no
Because
buffer.
you're common owners.
Right.
All your names are on that property.
So, yeah, if there's not a buffer, then.
Now, what will commonly happen with an estate is there will be a mix of assets. And normally when you got 5 kids, there's some cash, there's some house. And some of the kids, most of the kids, 4 of them, want the cash. They don't want the house.
Right.
1 of them wants the house. And so what they do is they just trade up. Say, okay, the house is 110, the cash is 110 or whatever, and you know, I'll take the house and you guys take the cash and divide that up. We'll be all good, you know. Or they'll get a mortgage. The one who wants to own it will finance the house. They'll take a mortgage out on it. The bank will disperse the money to pay out the rest of them, and they'll pay off their mortgage note. So those are some of the things. But yeah, it gets sticky on some of those where you got, and you know, the responsible kid wants to take care of the house and fix it up and sell it. The others, they don't even have the money maybe put into it. And
Right.
keep good records, and when you sell it, make sure you get that repair money back, and that'll help you out with that. And you know, if you do have a trust or something, you know, I've had, you know, guys bring in their trust to me. It wasn't even notarized yet. That doesn't work. And he said, yeah, I have a trust. Everything's in the trust. The trust wasn't listed as a beneficiary on any accounts. So guess what? The trust wasn't worth the paper, basically, that it's printed on, although maybe if it had a pour over, but even that not being notarized, it wouldn't have caught those assets. So it wasn't, A, that one wasn't even legally executed, but B, if you don't put the trust on some stuff, there's nothing in it. It governs what you name to it. Okay, so you have to fund, that's what they call funding it. Okay, so if you do have one, please make sure you've put that on the assets that you want into the trust versus the ones you want out of it. And then contingency planning is critical, which is as simple as just naming contingent beneficiaries. So in most cases, you can say, okay, this goes to my son, and if he's predeceases me, it automatically goes down to my contingency. A lot of times with retirement plans especially, it's good to name the spouse or the kids first, and then the trust contingent if you have one. Just because there are some tax privileges and things that an individual can exercise that an entity might not. You know, normally when I'll send somebody to an attorney to get a trust, it's going to be when they've got some complicated issues. And like in my case, I have a child from when I was 20, before I was married, and I have 3 children since I was married. It's really critical to me to make sure that that son never is accidentally disinherited, right? Because legally, otherwise, by default, all my stuff goes to my wife and goes to her kids, right? So we have a trust that carves out my son's share and also dictates some of, like, you know, I wouldn't have wanted me to inherit $250,000 or whatever when I was 18. I wouldn't have it, and I might not even be here to talk to you about it any longer, right? And so I want to make sure that, you know, some of that money is maybe dispersed to them over time, and there's some responsibility and some governance if my minor children were to inherit a substantial, you know, amount of money.
If you have a trust and you disperse money over a period of time, is there a limit over the number of years, 10, 20?
No, it really, the beauty of a trust is your instructions can be as complicated as you want. You know, they could be, a trust exists in perpetuity, you know, I mean, until it's dissolved, basically, closed out, which is pretty much when it has no assets left in it. You know, so yeah, it could be for one person's life. We have still floating around in Kansas, old family farm trusts that have gone on generation after generation. So yeah, they can be pretty complicated. And when you have complicated instructions, that's part of when a trust starts to become something you really want to think about. Another thing about beneficiary designations is there's unique types, like a restricted payout. Let's say I've got 3 good kids and 1 ne'er-do-well child, right? And I want to make sure the other 3, I don't mind, they can have the money in lump sum, do what they will with it. I know they make wise decisions. This one I know does not make good decisions, and I want him just to have a little allowance every month so that he can never spend all of his money. You can do that sometimes with what's called a restricted beneficiary payout designation. Not every company, product type necessarily has to offer those, but if that's one way you can do that, where otherwise you would use a trust for that purpose. Another great option for a contingent beneficiary, if you're not sure who to choose, if it doesn't go to my wife and my kids, a charity or a nonprofit corporation, especially like if you have a charity that you can leave an IRA to, because, you know, a charity is tax exempt. The IRA money has never been taxed. If you leave it to the charity, it never will be taxed. And that's pretty powerful, especially if you have anybody you'd rather give the money to than the IRS when you're done with it. Is there anybody you can think of? I'd give it to you, Dan, before I would give it to the IRS, except for what they're legally entitled to. That's for the camera. So, any questions on wills and trusts and all that stuff? Okay. So, I want to thank you all for your time.